So as we discussed last time, the first major form of theater to come out of the Middle Ages were the liturgical dramas, but they were having a hard time reaching their audience because they were long, they were dull, and they were delivered in a language that only a fraction of the audience could understand. So drama had to take a different shape if it was going to reach the masses to the extent the church was hoping. And one of the first successful changes was the creation of the cycle plays, which have also been called mystery plays. So cycle plays were the exact opposite of liturgical drama in almost every conceivable way. First of all, they were shorter, they were much easier to digest. Like liturgical drama, they dramatize a series of biblical events from the creation to the Last Judgment. So basically taking the stories from the Bible in sequence and presenting them, hence the term the cycle. Whereas liturgical dramas were presented as a special attraction in a church or cathedral, cycle plays were presented outside in the town square and were put on by the denizens of each specific town. So what they would do is break the stories of the Bible up into these smaller sections: the creation, the flood, the birth of Christ, the Last Supper, and so on. Each section would be sponsored by a different tradesman union depending on what would be the best fit for their specific trade. So, for example, the Carpenters Union would sponsor the play about the flood and Noah's Ark. The bakers would sponsor the play about the Last Supper and so on, basically hoping that, people would see these things, or you go see the play about the Last Supper and go, man, the bread that was on that table really smelled good. Well, lucky for you, Joseph's Bakery offers that exact same bread right down the road. So what we see here this is one of the first examples of a form of entertainment having public backing and product placement. Those things that are very, very common in today's world, this was one of the first examples. The plays would usually be performed on what they called a pageant wagon. This would be a small wagon that you could wheel out to the center of town and unfold it into a stage. It would have a little backdrop with entrances and exits. From all accounts, the staging of these plays could get pretty elaborate. We have one account that during a production of a play about the flood and Noah's Ark, the carpenters built this elaborate system of rain gutters all around the town and then poured huge barrels of water onto the roofs that would come down into the gutters and then rain down on the stage, so simulating the flood. This was all part of the effect to make these plays more accessible to a wider audience. As we learned from Aristotle, spectacle is a necessary part of every production to catch people's eye and keep them interested. It wasn't the only thing that was done to keep these plays fun and exciting. So first of all, like we said, they kept them short. Comedy was added to make them more appealing and entertaining, and they were also filled with anachronisms. As we discussed in the introduction video and the vocabulary video, an anachronism is where a person or an event is featured outside of its historical place and time. As we also discussed in the introductory video, these were not mistakes made by the author. These were done on purpose. The belief being that by presenting these centuries-old stories to what was then a modern audience and putting it in a modern frame of reference would make it more accessible, and it would also allow the audience members to see themselves in the stories and also help them gain the appropriate lessons from it. An interesting point about cycle plays, and indeed all plays of the Middle Ages, is that none of the plays that were being performed ever carried an author's name. They were either signed as anonymous, or the authors were listed as the town in which they were performed. For instance, several of the surviving cycle plays are credited to someone called the Wakefield Master, because they were performed in the town of Wakefield in York. So there is no one person or one defined author for these works. We believe this for a couple of reasons. In the realm of the cycle plays, it's because there were multiple authors, again, each play being presented by a different trades union. So when lumped together, they would simply give them kind of one name as an umbrella statement. The other theory is that, as we've discussed, theater was not a popular thing with the ruling class. The church very much looked down on it and the practice of it, even when it was serving their purposes. So nobody wanted to attach their name to a play because that would signify you worked in the theater and were thus a heathen and a sinner and all these other things. So instead, the plays were signed anonymous, so as to not to give glory to the individual, but to put the message where it was supposed to be, on God. So, of the cycle plays that we still have, probably the most famous is the Second Shepherd's Play, which was performed as part of the Wakefield cycle, sometimes attributed to the authorship of the Wakefield Master. The Second Shepherd's Play is kind of the shining example of everything that we have talked about and the elements that went into one of these plays. It was high on comedy, had a lot of anachronisms, very fast paced, very entertaining, little screwy, but on the whole, it was apparently one of the most popular cycle plays that were being performed at the time. I had discussed that there were three forms of religious drama that kind of shot off from the liturgical dramas, cycle/mystery plays being the first, miracle plays being the second. This was another form of religious drama. Once again, it's based off of biblical tales and based on the lives of saints. However, they are so similar to mystery plays that there wasn't really any distinction between them until the 1700s. So as such, we are not going to take a great deal of time and go into the vast differences about these plays. The primary thing to remember is that where the cycle plays dealt with the various stories of the Bible, the miracle plays had biblical tales, but were also more about the lives of saints, kind of more in the vein of the liturgical drama.